To appreciate all the work that has gone into all of this, and that, like we were talking about last night, that this isn't the first time that this has been done, but this is a very unique moment because we have a very powerful approach to what we're doing. That this moment wasn't just out of nowhere. That we actually have a lot of stories that come with us, and that's the place that we need to speak from. That as we read those demands out loud, that we keep ourselves calm, that we're loud and clear, that we breathe as we go through them, because this is our moment. This is our event. This is our time to shine and to speak our truths, and that's a very powerful thing. And so far, it's been really good. Yes.
Right now, the university is offended by our truths, but we have to recognize that it's not sin. In reality, the wickedness is on their side. We really have to be mindful of that fact, because I'm really getting irritated by these police officers staring us down right now, because I think throughout many students of underrepresented backgrounds' lives, we've been meant to question our integrity, just moving through life, moving through spaces. When something goes wrong, we question, did we do that? Did we do that? Did we have a part in that? Did we play a role in that social issue, that social problem? And that's not what we've been trained to think that way. And I'm sick of having to question whether I'm doing something that's wrong or right. And it's always inverted. Morality is inverted. The reality is that they are the wrongdoers in this case. We are in the right. And we just have to remain steadfast in that belief and not question ourselves.
Okay, I want to share a few words too. So this past weekend I went to Washington, D.C. Okay, so I went to Washington, D.C. and I went to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, which was super powerful. It had a wall of his famous quotes and saying, and being there in that space really grounded me, and I just felt his presence, and I feel it now, and I just want to read one that I think strikes a chord with me and with what we're doing. So, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And I think what grounds us and whose diversity and everyone who's here today is our love for our communities, our passion for justice, and what we do does not come from a place of anger. It comes from a place of intense pain, deep-seated generational pain, historical pain, and also the pain of the realities of what we face every single day at this institution and at other spaces in the society. But the only way where we can change that is through love, which is what is so powerful about what we're doing. That's why we have people who have been sticking around, because this is not easy work, but we're grounded in that. So thank you all for being here.
And that's why I love this group, because we're always questioning who's being left out of this conversation. There's always someone to be stepped on for another person to make a gain, but we're very conscious of our efforts, and we're making sure that no one's left behind in this process. So I'm just grateful to be a part of this group, because truthfully it's very rare to see so many very different dimensions of people's biographies all together working interdependently like this.
And then we will go ahead and make a brief statement to introduce our demands. We will go ahead and read the demands. We will go inside and hand deliver a copy to President Kaler. We've already given a copy to Shakira and to Catrice.
Let's see here.
Do you also
Awesome.
want to do the introduction?
I think someone else. I would feel more comfortable with someone else.
Well, good morning, everyone. Today, we're incredibly thankful that you have decided to join us. We particularly appreciate your willingness to come and participate in this moment since it's so cold outside. We would like to start out by acknowledging the fact that we are standing on Indigenous land. Regardless of the aesthetic changes we may perceive in the present day, we would also like to honor the ancestors who have guided us this far, and who will continue to guide us as we move forward with our efforts. But there are many structural problems that inform the way our institution is run at this moment. We have asked questions. We have addressed the university through the proper venues. We have yet to see results. Today, we are ready to enact change. Our organizing efforts are rooted in a sincere love for and commitment to our communities. We want to ensure that people in our campus feel safe, welcome, and supported. This has not been the case for everyone, particularly for people of color and or GLBTQ people and or differently abled people and or working class people. We have testimonies that illustrate the unwelcoming environment we face on campus. Some of these testimonies were shared during the student panel we held on March 10th, some during our testimony collection event on April 9th. We have uploaded them and have created an archive via our Tumblr page. We thank and applaud the people who have demonstrated great courage in sharing their stories with us, and we seek to honor them by organizing and making visible the need to pursue policies that ensure the safety and well-being of all people. We have been asked about our reluctance to attend the university-endorsed public forums and events where the administration asks students, staff, and faculty for their feedback about the state of diversity on campus. Rosanna and Kong will now address some of these questions.
As a growing social movement whose diversity has no desire to seek formal recognition from the University of Minnesota as a student group, we appreciate the administration inviting students to voice concerns over the state of diversity at the university through various public forums. However, the unequal power relations established within these forums leave concerned students and aggrieved members of surrounding communities at a severe disadvantage in their efforts to affect meaningful changes. We believe that these institutionalized dialogues actively stifle difficult and opposing perspectives about what diversity means for us as a university. So what does it mean when diversity reflects not substantive diversity, but instead a institutional management of minority difference, which is the incorporation of minorities into the university's missions? How does the university confront this form of cosmetic diversity? Without wrestling with these important questions, the university cannot, in good conscience, uphold its image as an institution committed to community engagement and diversity. We believe that dialogue and negotiations must take place on equitable terms and within spaces that support the self-determination of all parties involved. Part of our deep reservations of becoming a subsidiary of the university comes from the sobering histories of other student movements. We have witnessed the potential for earlier movements to become beholden to the broader set of power relations that obstruct substantive efforts at actual diversity within the university. Remaining autonomous protects us from the very real threat of co-optation. We are not solely referring to the co-optation of our efforts as a movement, but the appropriation of our ideas, identities, and culture.
Becoming beneficiaries of various privileges associated with formal student group recognition would make us complicit in reproducing a homogenized form of diversity. While homogenized diversity may seem oxymoronic, it remains a salient part of the university's identity. Subscribers of this form of diversity are beholden to existing power structures and the interests of university administrators, the majority of whom are not representative of historically marginalized students. Our decision to remain autonomous is not only beneficial to us as a movement, but also to the university itself. All public institutions require an independent system of checks and balances to hold these powers accountable and ensure that the organizations and institutions are fulfilling the missions to the people they serve, their mission to the people they serve. We have willingly stepped up to be this system of checks and balances to ensure that the university uphold its commitment to diversity. When necessary, we will kindly remind the university that diversity is a process, not an event or a moment that can be achieved by just sprinkling a few faces of difference on catalogs and advertisements. By assuming this responsibility, we are helping the university to fulfill its own mission at broader community engagement and public service. And in return for our efforts, we don't seek university funding or sponsorship. Instead, we ask that the university respond to the mandates of its own conscience by engaging in constructive dialogue with us over our demands and expectations to foster an academic community that's conducive to the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual growth of us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kong and Rasan. Instead of addressing the questions we presented during the unveiling of the second floor of Coffin Memorial Union, many of us have received letters from the Office of Student Conduct and Academic Integrity with accusations of being in violation of the Student Conduct Code. With this in mind, we address you today, and we present the following demands to the administration of the University of Minnesota. So to introduce our demands, we are reminded that the University of Minnesota is a land-grant institution, and that as such, its mission is to promote access, and I quote, to promote access to higher education and collaborating to advance knowledge benefiting communities, the state, and world. In doing this, the essence of actual diverse experiences, epistemologies, and intellectual productions are consistently devalued and or erased. In this setting, specific incidents in multiple climates of racism, homophobia, ableism, and classism are ignored or denied. Whose diversity is continuing a conversation that began in 1492, and that was highly visible during the 1969 Morrill Hall student takeover. This conversation was most recently revitalized with the Hughes University campaign in 2010 and 2011. In continuing the questions that we are asked at that point, and still in conversation with the leaders of that campaign of Hughes University, whose diversity emphasizes the need for permanent and substantial structural changes, as well as a sustained commitment to equity within the university. So with this in mind, we present to you our list of demands.
Our first demand, we expect engagement with substantive instead of cosmetic diversity. And what we mean by substantive diversity is really the willingness to wrestle with questions about hierarchies based on race, class, gender, ability, and sexuality. So it's not just about race, but it's about racism. That's what when we speak about cosmetic diversity, it's incorporating race, but it fails to understand broader structural inequalities that we confront on a daily basis. So with that in mind, we demand that the university fundamentally reorganize its goals and priorities to include access and justice for local communities within the Twin Cities. As a public land-grant university, access and justice for working class communities in the Twin Cities should be the priority. This means reconsidering who benefits from the transformation of the U of M into a world-class public research university. We demand that the university redefine its commitment to diversity in a manner that always includes historically marginalized communities, that it be transparent and state who it means by diversity in all of its communications concerning this issue, and that it honor commitments it has made to these communities. That is, if it states that the following communities embody diversity, that is, if it states that people of color, including underrepresented groups and new immigrant populations, people with both visible and invisible disabilities, people who identify as women, people of various gender and sexual identities and expressions, first-generation students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, then it must serve them in action and not just word.
Our second demand is that we expect that the recruitment, retention, and graduation of students from historically marginalized communities will become a priority. We demand that the university immediately remove language from its admission applications that questions prospective students about their prior convictions and criminal offenses, as well as their history of expulsion, suspension, and/or probation in their former institutions, as is stated in the UMN freshman application for admissions of 2014. We believe this is an issue of equity and justice given that people of color are disproportionately targeted for expulsion and suspension in the education system and are disproportionately profiled, convicted, and incarcerated in the criminal legal system. If these questions must be asked, then they can be asked after students have been considered for admission. This would be in line with the Ban the Box law that Governor Dayton passed in 2014, which removed questions regarding applicants' criminal background from initial job applications. We demand improved active recruitment of students at the community college level and a commitment to support these students with adequate resources, financial and otherwise. This includes orientation activities that parallel those of incoming freshmen, a mandatory tour of the second floor in Kauffman Memorial Union and of Appleby Hall, and in literature that includes all of the resources readily available for students. In solidarity with Students for a Democratic Society, we demand that the administration prioritize recruiting students of color until the university accurately reflects the demographics of the nation. We demand that UMN create and implement a plan for meeting certain benchmarks. In 1 year, the university student body should be proportional to 1/2 of the Twin Cities demographics of non-white groups. For example, the student body should be 9% black in 1 year compared to the city demographics of 18% black residents. In 2 years, the university and students body should be proportional to 3/4 the city demographics of non-white groups. For example, the student body should be 13.5% black in 2 years compared to the city demographics of 18% black residents. It is critical that the university make a fundamental and permanent commitment towards campus diversification. In solidarity with SDS, we also demand the administration begin lowering tuition to increase accessibility for working class Minnesotans. Rising education costs create an economic squeeze that both pushes existing students into debt and prevents poorer Minnesotans from ever attending. This prevents diversity of class and race, as non-white racial groups continue to be systematically impoverished and excluded from economic mobility. We also demand that the university have available affordable housing in a central location on campus for those of lower socioeconomic status at a rate that students can afford. This would ensure all students can be a central part of university life and don't experience exclusively on the periphery. This is in response to the increased construction of, quote, luxury apartments along Washington Avenue in Dinkytown.
Our third demand is that we expect an emphasis be placed on the well-being of people from historically marginalized communities. And this is something that is rarely ever talked about. We have Mental Health Awareness Week, yet we don't talk about racial battle fatigue. In order to address some of those questions, we have the following set of demands. We demand an equal opportunity to succeed without enduring the mental anxiety of not being able to focus on and afford the university's academic life. Therefore, we demand the university establish an emergency fund to provide assistance for students from historically marginalized communities in dire need of financial support. This fund would be designed to keep students from becoming homeless, going hungry, or experiencing any emergency situation that threatens their health and well-being, as well as their ability to function as a student. We demand cultural competency for medical, counseling, and mental health services. This mismatch in biographies and consciousness between students of color and the medical providers who treat them, especially those in counseling and mental health services, should be immediately addressed and corrected. This includes having more medical providers of historically marginalized identities whose work is rooted in social justice. It also includes having professionals who are conscious of how our lives are informed by social justice-oriented ideologies. We demand a, quote, reporting discrimination, harassment, and retaliation, end quote, statement, and we provide a link, be attached to every syllabi, and that all students be made aware that they may submit anonymous reports. This statement must clearly detail a necessary commitment by faculty to the creation of safe spaces for historically marginalized communities within the classroom and clear options for students to file formal grievances against students and faculty who commit acts deemed racist, homophobic, sexist, transphobic, xenophobic, etc. We demand effective means be provided to address grievances with regard to discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. There needs to be transparency within the Office for Equity and Diversity about what the process entails, who receives complaints, and what the consequences are for perpetrators and repeat offenders. We demand the university give marginalized students, staff, and faculty equal opportunity to implement change without threat of suspension, dismissal, and/or attacking our right to organize, and this becomes particularly important at a moment where we are being targeted. This includes providing adequate funding and support to the organizing avenues historically used by marginalized communities within the campus. For example, the student cultural centers, ethnic cultural faculty associations, student organizations, ethnic studies departments, and union representation and engagement. We demand that the permanency of the student cultural centers be ensured and funded by the university. We demand paid staff who will handle the logistics of scheduling and accounting. We demand an end to all required quote-unquote reviews and evaluations of these spaces that threaten their permanency. The student cultural centers are critical in order to fulfill the university's commitment to providing education for a diverse community and often carry the burden of ensuring the recruitment, retention, and graduation rates of people from historically marginalized communities. We demand access to at least one gender-neutral restroom in every building on campus. We demand that all university buildings be compliant with the American with Disabilities Act. The current signage on the second floor of Kaufman is not compliant with the ADA.
All right, and our fourth demand states that we expect an emphasis be placed on a comprehensive educational experience for all students. Meaning, we demand a restructuring of the curriculum across the university to include substantially more courses that value, teach, and understand the histories, cultures, politics, and socio-economic realities of marginalized peoples. We demand an acknowledgement that the university exists as a product of colonial processes. We demand that the university require all students to take at least one ethnic studies course offered in one of the 3 ethnic studies departments: Chicano and Latino studies, African and African American studies, or American Indian studies, or the Asian American studies program. We demand that all students be required to take one course that deals with gender non-conforming issues in the Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies department, or any of the courses endorsed by the GLBTQA programs office. Since it has been the experience of both undergraduate and graduate students of color that there are not enough faculty of color to serve as our advisors, we demand that the university expand all underfunded and understaffed ethnic studies departments and programs to include a minimum of 8 faculty lines, at least 2 of which must be senior faculty members. We demand that this process be initiated within the next academic year, 2014 to 2015, and that hires be made in each successive year until those numbers are achieved. We also demand that new hires of faculty of color be made in all departments that currently have 1 or 0 representatives from historically underrepresented groups. We demand that faculty and new hires be paid competitive salaries. We demand that within 2 years, the university will have at least 2 faculty members of color engaging in critical race and ethnic studies scholarship with a social justice emphasis in every department, and that they be paid competitive salaries. We demand that the university give students of historically marginalized backgrounds an opportunity to play a role in the hiring processes of faculty of color. We demand CLA advisors and recruiters with cultural competence in ethnic studies. We also demand departmental advisors in ethnic studies departments who are culturally competent in these areas. We demand for increased exposure to histories of activism initiated by marginalized communities through the creation of an archive of historical documents and photographs, and that this archive be readily available to the public. Additionally, we demand a display that features these histories be created and located in a centrally located space, such as the second floor of Kaufman Memorial Union. There should be transparency about the university and its past dealings with race relations.
Our fifth and final demand is that we expect the acknowledgement and respect of surrounding communities. We demand that the University of Minnesota Police Department eliminate racialized crime alerts. We demand a halt to all projects initiated by the university and a withdrawal of public support for development projects that gentrify and displace local communities, such as the luxury apartment developments in the vicinity of the university. Instead, the university should concern itself with nourishing and restoring relationships with local communities and community intellectuals. Opportunities for bidirectional engagement and education should be welcomed and promoted by the university. The university needs to recognize the wealth of knowledge and culture that exists outside the walls of this university, and not just see these spaces as spaces for expansion. Moreover, further securitizing campus and displacing local communities will only make these goals more difficult to achieve.
By Elizabeth Martinez. Most histories continue to teach us not to understand and not to hope. But the struggle for transformation also continues, stubbornly insisting on other stories and other visions. The hope persists of grasping lessons from the past to help shape the future. Thank you.
Go for it. We will now proceed to deliver a copy of our demands to President Kaler, and we invite you to join us and document this historical moment. Our demands will be submitted to the Board of Regents, to President Kaler, to the Office for Equity and Diversity, and this document will also be made available via our website. Is this open?
I should have told you.
Welcome to the university. We're moving to the side. Doing well.
Hi, I'm Amy Phoenix. I'm President Taylor's Chief of Staff.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Hello.
We are the Who's Diversity Collective. We're a group of students, both undergraduate and graduate here on campus. And we have a letter for President Taylor. Do you want to go ahead and...
Thank you.
It's a list of demands that we as a collective have created over the past few months regarding the state of diversity at the university, based on testimonies and conversations with people we've had with students and faculty regarding what we'd like to see as far as substantive structural change at the university. So we are hoping that President Kaler will engage in dialogue with us regarding these demands and that we can have a conversation.
Would you be interested in meeting with him at some point?
We actually, if you don't mind, we could read the part of the letter because it addresses some of those questions.
I can read it. I know how to read, but if you want to read it, you can read it. What I would say to you is that certainly President Kaler, I think, shares your commitment to equity and diversity. He's made it a priority since he
Actually,
has
I'm sorry
gotten here.
I don't mean to be rude, but he actually stated publicly that that's not a top priority for the
You
university.
actually misheard
It's on
him.
video.
I was there that day, and his words kind of slurred together. And what he said is there is no more important priority. And he says that all the time. He is very committed to diversity, and I
We
do
have the
believe that you,
video.
I was there at the hearing, I do believe that you misheard him or he misspoke. He has said in numerous occasions that equity and diversity is important, that he believes that we need to increase the number of students of color on campus, that we need to increase faculty and staff on campus. He has put in place a new campus climate committee that has his most senior leaders at the table thinking about how to do these issues. And so I hope you will look through his whole body of work since he has been president, because I do believe you misheard him that day or he misspoke, because he has said countless times there is nothing more important. He serves on a committee in the community to work on the achievement gap, and the reason he does that is because he believes it's important for students of color to have access to the university and to have be qualified to enter the university through the K-12 system. So I do hope that you will trust me that I do believe in that particular video. He either he misspoke or it was misheard.
Well,
But he
given
is
that
absolutely
you're
committed
being
to
so generous and telling
equity
us
and
that he
diversity.
actually has a commitment to
Oh,
these
God,
issues.
yes.
This is an extensive and comprehensive list of
Okay.
approaches that
Cool.
we expect to see. We actually expect to see an answer by May 8th. And it's a plan of action that addresses all of the things that you have just mentioned.
Great.
Our contact information is there, and we look forward to hearing from you.
And would you be willing to meet? I mean, I do think rather than presenting a list of demands, it would be much more productive to have a conversation and to have a path forward together, as opposed to here's my demands and here's what we're going to do. And I think if we really want to move forward as a community, we need to be able to sit down together.
What we're asking for is for our initial thing that we're asking for is that the university make a statement about which of our demands you would be willing to actually put into action. So what we're asking for initially is a written comment or a written letter that would be available to the public, so that we can have a written commitment to some of these demands. Because what we have heard again and again is for us to engage in dialogue, and we have been in attendance of dialogues that have been opportunities for us to speak, but we have not seen many of the things that we have brought up during those events actually put into action. And so we are interested in a dialogue, but first we would like to see a real commitment from the university addressing specifically these demands. And that's why we have outlined them, because we know that the president has said in word that he's interested and that he has acted on some of that, but has missed a lot of the things that would actually impact students of color, LGBTQ students and transgender students, for example. And so we want them to be addressed specifically in, with regard to these demands.
To make that clear that this is a community effort.
And believe me, I'm very well aware, and President Kaler is very well aware that there are some very deep-seated concerns in the community. Moving the needle on these issues isn't something you do overnight. It's hard work, it's life work for many people, but we need a starting point. And I think a dialogue. I would certainly look at these. I would certainly absolutely share them with President Kaler. We will get back to you in some way, shape, or form. We might propose a different path forward, and we might have a dialogue around our path forward, rather than you dictating a specific path forward. And if we don't do it, you're going to be mad at us, because I think what's most important is that we come to the table with a good faith effort, and we try to find the things that we can do together, and we will come to the table with a good faith effort. I will tell you that. We will absolutely do that in our office. We're committed to that.
I think it would be really helpful also the kinds of terms that are often imposed, particularly on communities of color or from historically marginalized backgrounds, like being mad at someone. I think it's important to not engage in that kind of language, because
That's fair. That was probably bad word choice on my part.
So, unless anyone else has anything they want to add.
Also, it's not dictation if it's a democracy, if it's a democratic decision that is coming from multiple members of the community.